Damo, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, cheers, man. Cheers. Excited to be here.
Now, probably a lot of listeners don't know, but you are the son of legendary surfer and shaper and good friend of the BoardRoom Show, Maurice Cole.
Yes, I am. Yep. I've had to deal with that mad character my entire life. So I've had a pretty exciting life.
I bet. One silly question that I sometimes get, does your dad prefer Morris or Maurice?
I think traditionally everyone's we've always called him Morris, but
Yeah.
then in the US it comes out as Maurice. And there's the spelling as well of MAU rather than MORR.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit of a change, but we always, I think it's also the accent in Australia, which I know we got a pretty strong accent. So Morris is always the one.
Yeah. Yeah. So were you born down in Victoria near Bells?
No, actually, I was born in France.
Oh,
Yeah. So I've got an older sister, Maureen, who's 3 years older. And we were both born there when my dad kind of my parents, my dad and my mum had that kind of 15 year kind of timeline there in France in Hossegor. So grew up in Hossegor and essentially grew up speaking French and English at the same time. So I'm bilingual, which has come in quite handy throughout my life. Uh,
yeah.
and I was also, I guess, witness to the birth of the surf industry in Europe too, which was really exciting to watch. And obviously my dad was part of that as well. So yeah, it's been pretty amazing life so far, but I've got plenty left to go as well.
Cool. So you learned to surf in Hossegor.
Yeah, yep. Actually, Hawaii was the first time I remember standing up. I
Yeah.
remember very vividly my first wave standing up, getting pushed in, standing up and actually turning around and looking at my dad who was kind of standing there in waist deep water. So, but also had also surfed throughout summer and stuff like that a little bit in France. But funnily enough, I didn't really start really getting into surfing kind of, I guess, full time till we lived in Margaret River, which is in the southwest of Australia. So we moved from France to Margaret River. And that's when I really fell in love with surfing. So considering my dad's, a surfboard shaper and we've been within the industry, our family has been our whole lives. I kind of started a little bit late, really.
Yeah.
But I've made up for it since.
Yeah. So, um, how old were you in Margaret River?
From the age of 9 till 14. Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
then we moved because I think it was just a little bit too hard for business for my dad. Because we lived 3 hours south of the most isolated city in the world. So when you're talking business through the 90s, it's not that easy. If you get a container load of blanks that are wrong or stuff like that, it just didn't make kind of economic sense for the business. So then we moved. My parents kind of essentially went full circle back to Torquay. And then that's where, yeah, for me, my hometown, I'll always call my hometown Bells, hometown Torquay, sorry, and then my home break is Bells Beach, which I feel very fortunate to have grown up there.
Yeah, for sure. Tons of history there at Bell's. So you moved to Torquay probably, I'm guessing when you were like 12, 13, 14, something like that.
Yeah, 14 years old, yeah. So kind of towards the end of high school there, and kind of finished my high school there, and then from there it was interesting because I've had a lot of people throughout my life always comment on like, oh, your dad's Maurice Cole, are you a shaper? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And then it's always well, why aren't you? And it's one of those things, I think, a mixture of like, I guess when your dad's so good at his job, he casts quite a big shadow. And I think maybe subconsciously as a kid, I just kind of saw that and I was like, that's his thing. I'm going to go off and kind of create my own world. And yeah, I just kind of always was kind of interested in, I wanted to spread myself, and I've got a real thirst for knowledge. So I kind of was always interested in a lot of different things. Like I grew up kind of playing rugby, tennis, Australian rules football, karate, basketball, like just always doing different stuff as well. So it's kind of kept me really kind of intrigued. But then so a lot of my 20s I spent kind of, and I'll be completely honest with you. I probably spent a lot of my 20s talking myself down and kind of in a bit of a negative headspace that, you know, I didn't have the greatest self-confidence and was always kind of thinking, well, I'll never amass to anything, and I'll never really kind of, it was just a kind of a false narrative that I set myself for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Ended up working in the construction industry for a long time, and the mining industry in Australia is quite huge as well, and there's a lot of money in that. So for a lot of my 20s, I kind of was in and out of the mining industry and the construction industry, and I'd save a lot of money and then would go off and travel for 6 months to a year. You know, like I went back and lived in France for a couple of years, and kind of went to Japan and lived in Japan for a year. And so was really got the kind of travel bug for a long time. And then never really kind of, I guess I was floating through life a lot. And as I said, kept telling myself like, oh, well, you're making money and just keep enjoying life. But got to kind of my late 20s and then realized, I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like I've always been an environmentalist at heart, I feel. And then just kind of got to a point when I was earning more money than I'd ever earned in my life, like ridiculous amounts of money in the offshore industry. And I was just like, it was soul destroying. And I was just so unhappy, and just kind of had a realization while I was sitting there one day at work where I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I decided to kind of give all that away and move back to Victoria, and then took up an environmental science degree.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, tell me a little bit. I'm kind of fascinated by the mining industry and actually the offshore oil industry too. Like, what did you do in the mining industry? Like, what does that even mean? Like, were you down there in the pits with like a black face and like pulling out coal and shit, or were you
Not quite,
like
although
an executive, or were you playing golf? Like, what's going on?
Probably a little mixture of both there. I wasn't quite underground, you know, a couple of mile underground or anything like that, although that does happen. A lot of miners are in that. I was more in the refinery kind of side of the operations, and I was a scaffolder. So kind of essentially making platforms so that other workers could kind of get to hard to get to places. So that was predominantly what I did for most of my 20s. And then towards the end of my 20s, I ended up getting an offshore gig, which is really, really hard to get. Like it's all about who you know, essentially. And you need a friend in there who can help get you in. And I just got really lucky where I had a friend in human resources, and they needed a whole bunch of crew just as laborers. So I turned into a welder's trade assistant. So essentially just passing tools. And so I was kind of bottom of the barrel really of those. I was definitely not an executive. I wasn't part of any of that. We were kind of, the ones on the tools.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the mining industry is huge. And when you realize just how big it is, as you said, it's not just people underground mining the stuff. Then the flow on effects of, like, you need manufacturing, you need kind of people making, you know, the tools and making all the massive machinery, and then the refinery, and then, you know, so it kind of it's a huge industry, and you can kind of be part of it.
Yeah. I don't know too much about it, but I'm fascinated by it because, you know, with the move towards electric vehicles, and there's just so many of the Earth's natural elements that we all are trying to extract so that we can make all of these toys and all of these things that we deal with, which, you know, they're like, we need these things, you know, like it's not necessarily a bad thing to be the mining industry, but I think that, like anything, you know, there's probably excess, you know, and like there's nobody really. And again, I'm sort of speaking out of turn. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but
no, but
I'm sort of fascinated by it because it's easy to poo that thing, but I think it's also like, you know, hey, I've got my phone and we're talking on this computer, and these things need these elements that we're pulling from the earth.
Absolutely. And it's the hard thing, is that we've constructed an entire society based around our reliance on resources. And you're right, every single thing on this planet that is human made has been thanks to, in large part, the fossil fuel or the mining industry, and mainly the fossil fuel industry. And I think that's a big one. And you've got to also, there's a certain aspect here. We have to separate the fossil fuel industry from the kind of precious minerals industry as well, because they are two separate things. And I'm always, you know, anytime I do speak about this stuff, you have to be upfront and acknowledge the fact that the fossil fuel industry has created our society as it is today. The clothing we're wearing, thanks, as you said, the computers, the phones, all of that stuff is thanks to the fossil fuel industry. And to me, the argument is not, as you said, poo-pooing the fossil fuel industry to a point of like, we have to acknowledge where we've come from, but it's also time to stop, and we're now realizing the ramifications of our actions over the last 100 to 200 years are now starting to catch up with us. And we're starting to actually see firsthand the effect, the negative impact that we're having on this planet. And that's where you move into the precious minerals in the renewable sector, when you're looking at solar energy, wind energy, all of that, which also create, we need all of this intensive kind of minerals, as well as, so it's this kind of catch-22 we're in right now. And I think it's like, it's not realistic to kind of think that we can just go 100% onto renewables and that's the golden ticket, because the other reason is to have this uncapped kind of sense of this kind of uncapped sense of like take. We're just constantly wanting to build more, make life easier, and that's where we're getting in trouble, is that we've got this whole world of convenience at our disposal, but we're falling into this trap of now we're having to fight precious mineral mining companies who are going into, I now live up in the Northern Rivers, like around Byron Bay, and that whole area is called the Northern Rivers for a reason, right? So many river systems and water systems, but they're now trying to mine for precious minerals, which is now having an effect on the river systems because they're pumping stuff into the rivers. And so it's kind of this catch-22. So we're now having to have responsible mining in this kind of renewable energy sector. And that's a whole nother fight in itself, but it's also about each and every one of us doing what we can to reduce our impact personally. And also it's got to be a flow-on effect. It's got to be, I always say, people tend to go onto this whole thing of like, oh, it's up to the government, or it's up to big business. Oh, no, it's up to the individual. No, it's because of the, over in the US, it's because of the Republicans. No, it's because of the Democrats, and they've got to do more. And everyone's pointing fingers. And the way I look at it is like, hey, this has to be a bottom up, top down, left to right, right to left, inside and out, and outside to in. Everyone has to have has to try and make a positive impact on this planet.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the way you said that. And there's so many things that you touched on there that are interesting to me and that are outside the scope of this particular podcast, because I'm ignorant. I don't know. I'm not the expert. I don't even know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
But I do sense, though, that part of the problem is that there's a right way to do things. And I sometimes get the feeling that that right way is being pushed down because of the people that are in power. Like, yeah, but I can make more money doing it this way over here, And the other thing I'll touch on before we get into something else is I listen to all these crazy podcasts about, where we're going in the future. I actually listened to this one podcast that's called Macro Voices, and it's about the energy industry. And they're talking about the race to get precious minerals and precious earth elements or precious elements out of space, out of the planets that are in space. Like, stuff's happening. There's little, like, crazy little political wars that are like strings are being pulled right now to start to tap into those, whatever minerals they don't even know exist. They think maybe I can get some iron ore out of the moon. Who knows? So anyway, that's a whole nother thing that, again, I'm
It's
ignorant. I don't know.
continuing, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's the biggest issue too, is like, to me, the number one issue in this world is greed. Is like, look at where we've come from. We were okay for thousands of years with not having too much. Everything we're doing right now is very new. This whole consumer-based lifestyle is quite a new phenomenon, and it is pushed by the higher entities, being, your massive corporations, where profit is number one. People don't care, or corporations, I should say, don't care about the little guy. They don't care about kind of how things are done and whether it's done right. They're beholden to their investors and their shareholders. That's their number one, and probably their own, for the most part. You have obviously companies like your Patagonians and stuff who, you know, they're the ones that are changing the game a little bit. But generally speaking, you're right in that people are more focused on how to make things cheaper, and kind of there's no real thought behind how things are done. And there's a really, really good just a 20-minute YouTube clip that's called The Story of Stuff. And that was a really pivotal kind of video for me moving into this environmental space from the oil and gas, where they make this real quote that's, or this saying that's like, if you're buying a $5 toaster, like you know, like toast or whatever it is, a coffee maker or whatever, if you're buying a $5 thing from Target, you're not paying the full cost. And somebody along the way in that production chain is. It may be the environment, it may be someone who's not being paid well enough, it might have been with someone's life or health, or, you know, like, and that's the key thing is, you know, and let's say Patagonia is actually a really good example on this. When people go, Patagonia is great, but it's so expensive. And my answer to that always is, no, it's actually the true cost of things, because they've set up their entire organization so that whatever they do, they're trying to reduce their impact on the planet as much as possible. And that to me is that big thing of, when you prioritize profits over everything, which is to me the definition of greed, then you're going to end up in trouble. And it's the same in the surfing industry. When you see whatever it is, other companies and stuff, whether it's clothing or whether it's surfboards, if you're buying a surfboard for $500, someone else is paying the price for you, you know, and that's where, to me, that's what really grinds me, is going, but as an individual and the little guy, you might not have the choice, and you might, you know, that might be all you're able to grab. So that's where, you know, and we'll probably move into it in a second, but that's where for us, Varuna, we want to change the game in that surfboard industry as well, right? Is to change the way we perceive surfboards. It's not some kind of disposable thing that you shouldn't have to have 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 surfboards a year and having
guilty as charged.
Well, as long as you're keeping them, you know, if they're all snapping and kind of you're throwing them in the landfill, and this is maybe I need to get you a nice quiver of Varunas here, Scott, but it's about that longevity, you know, and you look at certain shapers that really are pushing for that, where maybe the materials haven't been there historically. So our answer to that has been, oh, well, let's make them better, and heavier glass jobs, and better resin, and better foam, and better stringers, and all of this stuff. We at Varuna have just stepped up another level, and we're on a mission to redefine the world of sustainable surfing.
Cool. Well, yeah, let's get into that a little bit. I was lucky enough to ride one of the boards, the one, I don't know if it's the one behind you, but it was a Maurice Cole. Yeah, it was one of your father's designs. So tell me a little bit about the construction of the boards themselves. So Varuna Surfboards, I can see on your shirt it says from seed to surfboards. Maybe explain that a little bit, and then we'll get into designs and stuff. So tell me about from seed to surfboard. So obviously, you know, from your marketing on your t-shirt, you're making something that's environmentally conscious, that's sensitive to what's happening in the world. And
yeah, absolutely. So so you can see, obviously, so behind me here we've got the board that you rode. That's kind of how, that's the bottom of the board. That's how they look, and that's how we're selling them. If you look over to this side here, this is actually the internal structure of the board. So there's actually no foam in our boards whatsoever. And the way that we've kind of created our company, and you know, full transparency, we have definitely looked at Patagonia as an inspiration to make sure that every step of the way, for us, we want to make sure that we reduce our impact on the planet. So that's where from seed to surfboard came in, was we control everything we do, all the way from planting the seeds. These boards are made out of balsa wood, which is that's kind of originally from South and Central America. So we kind of plant our own stuff in Indonesia, and then we create our surfboards from that wood, and we have control all the way through to selling our boards. And we want to make sure that from seed to surfboard, every single aspect has a planet first mindset. So that what does that entail? So first thing is making it out of wood compared to foam, that's already, that's huge in our reduction.
So hold on. So if you're planting balsa in Indonesia, and kind of going back to what we were talking about like not, impact, less impact, is first of all, is that okay? Like, is balsa like an invasive species, or like, are you doing something that we shouldn't be doing here? Are are you wiping out like a village to plant ball? Like, what are you doing? Damo, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold you. I'm gonna hold you to this.
It's a very, very good question, and that's kind of the part of this is also when you look at environmental factors, it's not just the material itself. It's how it was processed. It's where it comes from. It's the longevity of it. So there's a lot of factors to what makes something sustainable. And what we do is, and you're right, it actually is originally from South America and Central America. It was actually used in Indonesia through the 70s. There was a lot of deforestation going on, a lot of illegal deforestation in Indonesia that was going on through the 70s and 80s. Still a lot going on, unfortunately, there, but it was really rampant through the 70s and 80s. And what they did was they ended up going through, because balsas are really fast growing hardwood. So they went out and they just started throwing seeds out into these deforested areas. And because they grow so quick, they actually ended up kind of taking over a little bit. And it was another kind of way that sorry, just got a phone call there.
No
it's another way that humans have kind of made another mistake where they've tried to repair something with a bit of an easy fix and it didn't quite work out. So we have two ways of actually cultivating our balsa at the moment. The first one is going in and essentially weeding forests. So we're selectively logging only the balsa trees. So we do work with local villages and things like that. We pay them per log and things like that. So they go in, they selectively log all the balsa that we want, drag it back out, and then we put them in these giant kilns, we dry them out, then we cut the logs, and the process starts like that. And at the same time, what we've done, and this is the one where my kind of environmental mind gets really, I'm a bit of an environmental nerd. So I really love this kind of stuff, where the other way, because we wanted to get surfboards made straight away, obviously. So by going in and doing the weeding has been really effective in that way. But we also wanted to make sure that we wanted to have a sustainable way of kind of, and a lot more control over what balsa we produce or what balsa we're able to get. So we decided what we'd do is we'd go into these areas that have been deforested. So if you can kind of imagine like a giant square, deforested, it's been overrun with what they call ylang grass, which is kind of grass that's about anywhere between kind of 6 to 8 foot tall, really big grasses, which then means nothing else can grow there. So we go in, we cut it all down, all the grass, and then we kind of plant our balsa trees far enough apart. So as they grow, they provide a canopy, and then we get the local community. We work really closely with local communities in Northeast Indonesia. So they go in and they plant local species. And sometimes it might be fruit-bearing species so that they can continue to make some money as well, things like that. So we're working really tightly with the communities. So as the balsa tree grows, it provides this canopy, which is shade, kills all the grass, and then the locals are working to make sure that the local species are growing just underneath the balsa. The balsa matures in about 4.5 to 5 years before it flowers. We make sure that we're going to cut it down just before it flowers so that we're not part of this invasive problem. And then we plant some more local species, and then that area has now been reforested. And it's also making a little bit of money for the local communities so that it's in their own interest to keep that area forested. And we move on to the next area. So we're going to have kind of continuous blocks of land that are at different stages of this process. So in that way, we're regenerating forests whilst cultivating our balsa. So it's kind of this win-win for the planet. We get our materials and the communities are making their money.
And I imagine based on the deforestation in Indonesia, there's ample opportunity for you to go in and plant one time. Basically, you do one plant and then you're out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's kind of unfortunately, but the silver lining is we now have a lot of space to play with. But the other thing is, I mean, this has been years in the making, and my partner, Tom, who's this crazy kind of science engineer guy who's just, he's an amazing guy. And he's been out there for years looking for the right, because balsa, you know, to get the right balsa, to get it super light and strong, and you need to have the right topography, the right soil composition, the right amount of water. You know, there's a lot involved in it. So to go out there and find all of their stuff has taken a long time. But again, we worked with the Indonesian government to make sure that everything we were doing was by the book. We really want to kind of set a precedent on, again, going back to this, doing things right. And thankfully we're able to do that. We've had investors that have been really patient with us to make sure that we weren't cutting any corners or kind of doing this like monoculture where we're just going in deforesting areas and none of that kind of stuff. We really want to kind of change the game, and that's allowing us. We're even in the process right now of doing a biochar oven, which is essentially some of the wood that is going to be too heavy for us. We're going to be able to burn and use it to power our factories in forests. So it'll end up being completely off grid. We'll be using that, and that's going to allow us to be not only carbon neutral, we're going to end up being carbon negative. So we're going to be actually giving back more to the planet than we're taking as an organization.
Wow. Those are some pretty lofty goals. And it seems like, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of stuff that could maybe go wrong, but I don't know anything about it. I mean, you know, what I know about surfboard building is to go buy a blank and shape it, you know what I mean? And so the whole idea of what you're doing is just, it's fascinating, and it's large. It's a large program that you're taking on. It's not just, you know, like there's so much that you're being concerned with, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're right. We've had to start like multiple companies in order to make these surfboards work, you know, and it's been, and this is where I give so much credit to Tom, because we kind of met just before COVID. He started it in 2018. I jumped on in 2019. And he was just like, threw a backpack on, went to Indonesia and started looking for wood in the jungle, found a factory to be able to make the boards, you know, and we've got an incredible manufacturer over there who makes all this really high-end resort kind of wooden furniture. And he's got probably one of, actually, my dad said, he goes, it's the best factory I've ever seen. Just best out of any other surfboard manufacturing. This guy is just really on board. So we've had to kind of start.
Is he an Indo guy, or the guy who owns the factory? Is he an Indo guy? Or?
He's actually European as well, but he's lived there for 35 years.
Like another a Dutch guy or something?
I think he's Dutch. Yeah. He's Dutch or Belgium. I always get the two kind of mixed up. But speaks fluent Indonesian. He's got some crazy stories from living over there for his own self, you know. But funnily enough, it's kind of one of these things of, he's also never stepped foot on a surfboard before. But we came to him with essentially kind of these ideas, and we were like, do you think you can make that? And he's a very straight shooter, where he was like, he looked at it and he was like, yep, we can do this. Absolutely. So we've been working really tight with him. So that's kind of one small component, but then we've had to, you know, create companies to be able to import the resin that we want, which is a bio-epoxy resin called Sycamine, which is from France. So that's 27% plant-based. So we've had to kind of create companies there, and kind of, then we've got the excess balsa that's too heavy for us to use, but we obviously don't want that to be waste. So we've created another company, and we've actually started selling balsa panels and kind of creating panels that can be used in construction, which is a lot better than using EPS foam and things like that. So we've had to really branch out. It went from being kind of this fun project that Tom kind of took on. And then when we met, I was like, if you're going to do this project, we need to be in the surf industry and really create something. So that's kind of where I came in, with the more surfing mindset. And then together we've kind of created this, like, it's just gotten bigger and bigger, but we've had to do this in order to be successful. And that's what it has taken for us, but it's also showing the dedication that we have to doing things right.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a model where you have a proven track record of creating and harvesting in a sensitive manner, all of this incredible hardwood, all of this incredible balsa that you're using just to make a surfboard. And it sounds like there's so many industries that would be like, hey, I'd love to tap into that story and buy your balsa and tell the environmentally conscious and sensitive and concerned story here.
And that's exactly what's happening. You know, we're just getting started. But again, this is all thanks to Tom. He's created these balsa panels that are like cross-grained and kind of pretty thick. And there's all of a sudden there's crew, like there's even the thought of like where there's cruise ships or shipbuilders. And they're looking at that going like, well, that's a super light way to make walls, you know, and they're all of a sudden really interested in that. So we're kind of we're pioneering the technology we have in the surf industry, and we're also looking at other industries and kind of pioneering in that as well. So it's a really exciting kind of project to be a part of because it's multifaceted. And then we haven't even got on to the fact that we're not designing our own surfboards, you know, where, as you know, you saw here, it's a Maurice Cole design. It's just our technology. And that's part of this beautiful thing that we're doing within the surfing industry is we're teaming up with shapers everywhere to recreate their surfboards. So we're paying homage to their designs, but doing it in a much more environmentally friendly way. And then you add on top of it the fact that originally surfboards were made out of balsa, you know, like, and redwood, but balsa was a huge component there in the 50s kind of thing before foam. So we've kind of got this like real, just beautiful story where we're creating new technology with trusted designers and shapers, and we're going back to our roots as surfers, and we're creating boards that last as well. And they go, as you said, they go really good, you know?
Well, and based on what I see behind you there, it looks like ribbed construction. So you have balsa ribs that are then a layer of balsa skin is put on top and bottom of the ribs. Is that what I'm seeing there behind you?
That's exactly what it is. So yeah, you can see, sorry, I keep getting confused with the mirror image, but we've got ribs all the way down. We've actually created our own, in terms of the ribs, we've got a little bit of bamboo in there as well, but we've cross-grained the ribs to make them really strong. We've got internally, we've actually got fiberglass in there. So everything internally, and these boards are really, really strong. So haven't had too many issues with people. We're yet to snap one, you know, but if there is some water that goes in there, it's fully watertight inside, you know. So we've looked at every single component of our boards to make sure, again, that we're doing things right. So no foam at all, as I said. We've got the ribs there. We've put the skin on top and bottom. We've got the rails, which are essentially parabolic rails as well. And that's where the real strength comes from. And then we've worked really hard on the performance of things, because people probably look at these sometimes and go, oh, yeah, how heavy are they? They look beautiful, but no, they're heavy. They don't go too good. And that was a huge part of what we wanted to do. Was we've been pushing performance from the very beginning. And when we started this, I, in my head, thought shapers are going to be the hardest people to kind of get on board with this, because they've got their designs.
Well, I would back up and say surfers are so conservative. We're actually, you know, for being such like free loving, you know, like you think that we're sort of liberal in our choices, but really we're like, dude, if it's not a PU board that I've been riding for 30 years, I'm good. I already know what I like. You know, like the surf population in general, I think, is just quite conservative. You know, for years we were into black wetsuits, and we still are, but for different reasons. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think it's just the shapers. I think the shapers in some way are responding to their clientele, which is going, I want a foam surfboard.
Yeah. Oh no, you're absolutely right. And it's quite ironic considering where we came from. And a lot of us know the history of, you know, surfers in the kind of 60s into 70s that are chopping off 10-foot boards and reglassing and dropping them down to the 7-foot range. And it's, you know, we've always pushed the boundaries as surfers, but it's as if this generation now, over the last kind of 15, 20 years, it was like we pumped the brakes on creativity and went, oh no, we're good now. We've figured it out. And this is as far as we're going. And it's like, we couldn't be any more wrong. Like the part of surfing, and like a huge part of surfing, in my opinion, is the creativity and the fact that there's never been a single wave in the world that has been the same. Even in the wave pools, you know, they're very similar, but bits of water are always a little bit different. Macaroni's one of the, you know, most mechanical waves in the world over in the Mentawais. It's still very different. Every wave that you get out there is going to be different. So then it means every surfboard that we surf is going to be different. And that's where I think what we're doing right now is trying to get people's heads back around to like, it's okay to have different things. You know, it's okay if you don't just surf your your standard shortboard that's a PU make with a 4-ounce deck and a 4-ounce bottom that's a thruster that's 18 and 3. It's like, change it up. Like, part of the beauty of surfing is exactly that, is that feeling that is so unique to us, to be able to fly down the line and draw different lines and high line and maybe do a turn where you've never done one before, or those different sensations. I feel like that's a huge part of what surfing is, and you're right in that surfers have become kind of very conservative, and I'd say probably the surf industry probably has a lot to, and the professional surfing industry and surfing as a sport probably has a lot to answer for, in that people have looked to the Kelly Slaters and the John Johns and the Italos and all of those crew, looked at them and go, well, what are they riding? And they get sucked into the marketing of that, of like, well, I need a Paizel Ghost. Nothing against Paizel, but you hear other pro surfers going, I'm not surfing a Ghost. That's made for John John, and it's like, but then the marketing side of things is it sucks people in. So for us, again, this whole part of it was pushing into new things that, like, new and different is great. It's amazing. It's nothing to be scared of, so, and going back to these shapers, that was kind of the biggest one, was thinking that they were going to be quite conservative and, a little bit unsure. And funnily enough, out of all the shapers we've worked with, my dad has actually been the hardest guy to get over the line,
Yeah, that is surprising, actually.
But was also the biggest help.
But when you think about it, your dad came up with this reverse V with Tom Curran, as he tells the story, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times. It was sort of by mistake, right? It was this blank that was that sort of got deformed up in the rafters, and
he shaped it as a joke. Essentially, it was kind of like, all right, we'll see how that goes, and then I mean, as history shows, the board went pretty good.
So I was lucky enough to ride Maurice's board,
the
one that he made for you. So, and I've had quite a few of your dad's boards, and so, like, your dad, I know your dad is like just having immense amounts of single concave in his boards, like just radical lift and tons of speed. Is that something that you can adapt or adopt into these balsa boards, these Varuna surfboards that you're making?
Absolutely. So the boards that we make, all we have to tell the shapers is make your file as close, like it has to be. We replicate the file exactly as is. So we've got a great CNC machine which cuts all the components. The boards are handcrafted, but we have a machine that cuts all the components. I don't even know how many components there are. It's 50 or 60. There's a lot of work in there. But that's been the beauty of what we've done, is we've been able to recreate these designs essentially flawlessly, as long as the files is good.
So you get like 50 or 60 cuts, and then you glue it up, and you've got this incredibly close tolerance. You've basically got the surfboard done, and then you just take some sandpaper to it and just kind of finish it, or
That's essentially it. We kind of, the crew in the factory will lightly sand it just as a finish, but our boards, once they're all glued together, our boards come out really close to being done. And that's where we've, again, just for full transparency, over the last few years, we've had to go back and forwards with shapers at times, because they'll just give us the file, and then we make the board, give it back to them, and they're like, it's a bit thick in the rail. We're like, because a lot of shapers will have the file good enough, and then they'll come in and kind of foil out the rails and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas for us, we're not doing any of that. So we've had to kind of work with the shapers to refine their files, which is probably doing them a bit of a service as well, because it's less work for their files as well. But yeah, so that's kind of been what we've done. And that our whole model is we want to share the love. We want to work with shapers all over the world who want to work with us. And we get to essentially, we tell the shaper, we're like, hey, we can recreate your design. We can be the environmental branch of your company. And you don't have to stop making your boards. We're not here to like compete and, talk down PU boards and tell everyone that they're horrible to humanity for not doing that. It's not part of what we do. Again, I understand that this Varuna t-shirt was going back to this energy thing. I understand that we're all doing the best we can. What we're saying is, we can be part of the surf industry and kind of lead the way in this kind of sustainable revolution without compromising with with performance, because the boards go really, really good, you know. So that's kind of been a really big part of what we wanted to do, is be able to showcase environmental integrity with that performance that we all love, and that's why we surf.
Yeah, it's kind of like baby steps, you know, like first things first, make sure that the surfers are, and we all have a pretty high standard, make sure the boards work. And then we can tell the story of how, hey, guess what? Not only do the boards work, but look what we're doing here. And everyone else can kind of start making a slow progress towards this end.
Yep, and that's exactly what we're here to do. It's not, and I feel like in the environmental space and in the world in general, people have kind of gotten on that high horse, and they try and go like, oh, you're bad for whether it's eating meat, driving a car that's not EV, traveling on planes, whatever. And it's not working, because people shut off to that. It needs to be
Totally.
that
Totally.
reinforcement. And
I
for us,
would,
we're more so looking at this going like, man, when we come to the US and kind of launch there, we're gonna have demo days. We want people, we want to give the surf community a big hug and be like, come on in, come with us, try these boards and see how they go. And then by buying one, you inadvertently are actually reducing your footprint by up to 4 times. So this has like a quarter of the amount of emissions to make our boards compared to your traditional PU boards. So we're kind of like, so, and we're not saying go out and throw all your boards away and buy 10 of our boards straight away.
wait a minute. I'm going to order 10 of these things.
Oh, I mean, if you can, I'm not going to stop you, you know.
No,
But our point is just also, we're not here to talk down at you and go, oh, you have 50 boards, Scott. You're the one destroying the planet. We're just going, hey, why don't you order a couple of these, and then you've got your mid-length there, which you know is going to last a long time. As long as you look after our boards, they're going to last a really long time. Or you've got your fish, or we've just started making longboards, and then once you start feeling that, you might go, oh, this board went really good. What other models have they got, or whatever? But it's like you said, it's that baby steps to just try it. Don't be afraid to try something new, because I'm going to tell you now, our boards don't go exactly like their PU counterparts. They are different, but it's the same as EPS and PU, you know, and it's the same as, I mean, Joel Fitzgerald, one of our shapers, has actually said, he goes, every single board I've ever made, even if they're the same dimensions and the same model, they're still different. And that's the beauty of surfing, is the uniqueness. You know, we don't want what we're seeing coming out of, you know, China and Thailand. Like, there's a lot of pop outs that you're just looking at going like, it loses that kind of that's the soul of the surfboard. And that's one thing that I think, coming from these surfboards, like everyone that's come in after they're surfing these boards are like, wow, it's so lively. It feels alive under your feet, you know, which is what we want. We want to be connected to our boards and connected to the ocean.
Yeah, you know, in many ways, I'm sort of like the classic old curmudgeon PU guy, you know, which I kind of am. You know, I'm kind of like, you know, all right, whatever, but I like this thing over here, and I'm just going to ride it. Like, I'm sort of the classic guy that we have to break the glass. You know what I mean? And I rode one of the boards the other day, and I've always been in love with the romantic side of riding a wooden surfboard. I think Randy Rarick once told me, he goes, no board rides as good as a balsa surfboard. Like, balsa is insane. And so I've sort of grabbed onto that, and I've been trying to find the right wooden board that I loved. And there's just not a lot of opportunity. You know, it's so much easier to just call your guy and go, make me a 6'4", hurry up.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed riding it, and I think you saw a couple of waves, and I mean, I had my mojo going. The board was loose, and I was psyched on it. You know what I mean? I mean, I'd like a smaller one, you know, but point
we
is,
can get you that. Don't worry.
I'm just like, to the listening audience, I was pleased. Like, I was engaged with the board. You know, I was excited about it, and so yeah, it worked good. Now, who else? I know that you've got your dad. Who else do you have? Joel, you have Joel Fitzgerald. Who else is involved right now from a shaper standpoint?
We got Maurice Cole, Joel Fitzgerald, Stuart Darcy. So we're predominantly Australian. We're based out of Australia, so and Indonesia. But yeah, so Maurice Cole, Joel Fitzgerald, Stuart Darcy. We've got a French shaper actually that goes under UWL. His name's Renault.
Yeah.
So he was one of the first guys that we jumped on as well. We've got Jared Mell, who's an American surfer, and he's become a shaper over the last few years. He's a great longboarder, and He goes under with Deus, so we were kind of jumping in with him and making some of his longboards. We've got Bo Young as well, we're making actually his longboard, which
Okay,
we're
great.
so excited about Bo Young's longboard. Like, he's a 2-time world champ and shapes beautiful boards. He's an amazing human being. And
He
yeah,
seems like a guy that would be ideal to help with the marketing part of it too, you know, like because
yeah,
you'll be able to get him riding the boards. Not well, you could get Jared Mel too, but you know, absolutely ripping on the boards because that's a big part of it. Is like we want to see proof in the pudding, you know, before we're ready to go. Okay, I'll try one, you know. But
yeah,
if I see Bryce Young going Richter, and I see Joel Fitzgerald, and I see Jared Mel, I'm gonna want to
yeah.
see these guys.
Well, mate, all you got to do is jump onto our YouTube channel. We've got dozens of videos there of all kinds. We had Margot testing out a whole bunch of boards as well. Like, we're working with crew that want to be, and that was the beautiful thing with Bo, actually, was he reached out to us. And this goes against what I was saying earlier, and this is what I realized really quickly with shapers is shapers are actually, for the most part, they're kind of really intrigued in what we're doing because they're very much aware of not only the environmental impact of the traditional surfing industry or surfboard industry, but also the health impact. You know, like a lot of these guys, like we're seeing it, like a lot of glassers and sanders and shapers are coming down with all these different illnesses and things. So we've had a lot of shapers that have come to us and actually gone like, oh, we love what you guys are doing because we've been wanting something like this for a long time. Chili's actually another one who's just jumped on board. He's doing his mid-strength with us, and we're working on another model with him. And we've just come out with what we'd call the Shaper series, and the Shapers kind of essentially have their little spiel of why they wanted to be with us, what they feel like the boards go like, you know, and like to have someone like Chili who is so commercially successful but and then looks at us and goes, actually, no, I want to make some models with you guys. Like that's a huge one as well, you know, to have those people who could have easily just continued on doing what they're doing, but they're essentially taking a bit of a punt on us, going like, no, this is, and as we said, we're redefining that world of sustainable surfing. So they want to be on board with this because it's going to take a village. It's going to take our entire surfing community to back us to for this to be successful. You know, like it's not like I'm sitting here with my hand out, you know, going, please everyone buy surfboards. But in a way it kind of is, because that's the only way we can make that big change, is having shapers and designers and surfers all coming together and going, we all want this change. And as I said, Bo Young was he came to us and was just like, I love what you guys are doing. If ever there's a chance, we'd love to do it. I'd love to do a model with you guys. And I was like, man, are you kidding me? Send some files. Let's go. Like the lineage of Bo Young and kind of what he's done in the longboarding realm. And then we actually made his longboard. And I feel like a bit of a like a, I don't know, like a proud parent or something. And then I get a bit nervous when I'm like, oh, I've got the new model, and we hand it over to the shaper, and it's a bit like, it's like sending your kid off to school for the first day or something, you know, when you're just like, oh, how are they going to like it? Are they going to come back and just be like, never again? And Bo, it's a great one. We were in Bali last year together and with a few of us, and he came back and he was just a bit, he's a very kind of relaxed kind of guy, pretty softly spoken. He came back and he was like, oh, you know, and I'm like, as he started doing that, I was like, oh no, here we go. He hates it. He hates it, you know. He goes, I tried so hard to find something wrong with this, and it goes insane. He's like, it's ready to go. Let's go. Like, let's get it out onto the market, you know, like, and to, again, have a 2-time world champ at longboarding. And it was our first attempt at making these boards for him, and he was just stoked. And now we're selling them, you know, and it's like, again, that to me embodies our story of like people wanting to work with us and us wanting to work with that. And it's that mix of the kind of the cult surf culture with this new environmental technology, which I just think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned all of these Australian designers and some surfers as well. And I wonder what is your sense of does Australia have more of um, a desire to be more earth conscious or more earth friendly than say the United States? Like is the United States consumer, and again, I don't know. We don't know. We're just riffing right now. We have no statistics or data to back this up. But I personally just go, it seems like the Australians are a little bit more keen to be more aware, I guess, of the impact of surfboard building.
I
Am I just like out of left field here, or
no. I think as to put it very simply, I think your gut feeling's probably right. That's kind of my gut feeling. But it's again probably a bit more multifaceted in that.
more nuanced than that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's a lot more because you kind of have an image of Australia being pristine and beautiful, and it is for the most part. Like we have like the population between San Diego and San Francisco, I think is more than the entire country of Australia. So
Yeah.
in itself, that is straight away we're going to obviously have a lot. We haven't really developed our coastlines as much, and we do have cleaner beaches, and that's absolutely true. But it's not to say like Australia still has a lot of conservative people and a lot of like there's another side to Australia that probably a lot the international kind of community doesn't really see as much. But I'd say because then you also have with the Australians are known to have what we call tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is,
I
but
do know what it is, and I think that's a big part of it. Why don't you explain it?
so yeah, so tall poppy syndrome it's kind of a cultural thing in Australia, which I don't really like, but I've definitely been guilty of it, which is you're never to really talk yourself up. It's always kind of if anyone ever gives you a compliment, it's like, oh, geez, you look good today. And the answer for most Australians will be, oh, nah, I forgot to shave, or I didn't like this hat, or whereas in the US, it's kind of the opposite where, if someone goes, geez, you look good today, a lot of Americans are like, yeah, great, thank you. I've been working on that and I look really good. Thanks. And it's the same with also products, is that sometimes you have this thing of when anyone, because the term tall poppy syndrome is like, if you have a poppy that grows higher than the rest, it gets chopped down from others. So as soon as there's someone who's successful in Australia, you start hearing that the haters are very loud.
Yeah.
It's, oh yeah, but he only did this because of that. And I remember when I saw him when he was not doing this. And whereas in the US, there's a lot more celebration and kind of that confidence and of just like being able to kind of like, it's like, oh, wow, this is new. Oh, I love this. And that's how, like when we got put in touch, you were just straight up like, man, this looks different. I love this. Yeah, let's go for a surf. Cool. How can I help? Let's jump on the podcast. Let's do this. Like, which it's not naturally always going to happen in Australia. It does to an extent. But
why do you think tall poppy syndrome exists in Australia? I have a theory that it has something to do with the stratification, the economic stratification of the populace. It's everyone's more or less in the same boat. Whereas here, there's like a big stratification, a big range. We've got billionaires and we've got tons of homeless people. And then there's a bunch of people in between. Seems like in Australia, the middle class is pretty solidly defined.
Well, yes, but with everything going on around the world, it's starting to kind of like we're having less and less of a middle class. It's the same. What happened over here is whatever's happened in the US, in large part tends to happen in Australia, but just to a lesser extent. So we still have over 100,000 homeless people in Australia. Like we still do have the billionaires, and we still do have people living on welfare and kind of like living paycheck to paycheck. But we also still do have that middle class, which I think is the US is probably that's eroding a little bit quicker than Australia. I actually think it probably goes right back to when Australia was first colonized. The fact that we did come out as the whole world knows, we were a bunch of convicts. It was this kind of like, and it wasn't only convicts, by the way. There were, initially it was a penal colony, convicts, but then they started wanting to get a lot more people to come in to develop industry. But I think a part of that would be, it was always that really tough going, the first 100 years or so was tough going. And it was just that like, kind of, you don't talk it out. You just get it. You just get the job done and off you go. And you never talk it. If you have any successes, it's just like, you don't talk that up, and I think that might've been where it really does come from. And it's not something that I particularly like in Australia, particularly I've now got a partner from the US, and it's been quite funny because the first couple of years she'd be giving me compliments. And as I said, I'd start finding ways to fault myself. And she'd be like, up, just say thank you. And it's like, wow, it's changed my life,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do feel like the US is great with that, where it won't necessarily, let's say with Verona, I'm not saying that it's more environmentally conscious in California, but you're also very open to new and different things, even though surfing is quite conservative in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me about how would I or anybody listening get a hold, like where are you at in the marketplace? Are you even in surf shops? Like what's the deal with access to the boards?
Yeah, well, we're not in the US at the moment. We're selling in Indonesia and in Australia at the moment, but we're kind of making moves to come over here pretty quickly, because again, there's a bit of an appetite for it. We've had a lot of people kind of just like, when are you guys coming to the US? Like so we're going to be over here pretty soon. I'm hoping that to kind of, I reckon realistically 2025.
Yeah.
We've got some conversations with some US shapers, which we want to kind of get some US based shapers to be able to open up into the US market as well. So we're working on all that kind of behind the scenes at the moment. But yeah, it's really exciting times that we're wanting to expand out to Europe as well, and kind of become global as we go. So we've now figured out, we've really got our production solid, we've got our technology solid, really confident in everything that we're doing. And now that's when we really want to kind of open up to the world and show everyone what we've got, because we're just like, we're so excited to show this to the world. As I said, we're redefining the world of sustainable surfing and surfing in general.
Now, there's no way that I can get a custom board though. Like for instance, I was just I was just riffing on my favorite shapers. I'm like, oh well, can I get a Stu Kenson? Can I get a Wayne Rich? Can I get a Ryan Sakel? Can I get a Pat Rawson? Can I get a Matt Biolos? Can I get a Channel Islands from Britt Merrick? Like, that's kind of like my initial thing. Like, where are we with custom surfboards? Like, is
So
this a customizable product? I guess is my question.
uh not at this stage. So the way that we've got to do it is we've got jigs. So we've only got certain dimensions that we can work with. And that's even one thing. If a shaper's not happy with whatever it may be, thickness, rocker, whatever, we have to start again with a new jig. Like
Yeah.
and that's how we make our boards so good, is that we're refined down to like, just like the tiniest, I was going to say millimeters, but in the US, the 16th of an inch, kind of like very much, or 32th of an inch, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Close tolerance. Close tolerance.
yes, yeah, we don't have too much tolerance in terms of that, but at the moment, what we're doing is getting a model of shaper, or usually two models of a shaper, and then we'll kind of make anywhere between 3 to 5 different dimensions and sizes. So the twin pin at the moment here that we've got of my dad's is a 6'2", 6'4", 6'9", 7'4". And then we're looking to probably make some longer ones of that as well, into the 8-foot range. So we're going to expand. Like, it's kind of, and this is part of the excitement, is like, we're just getting started,
Yeah.
and this to me is like, I hope that in 5 years' time, we're sitting here having another chat on the podcast, and I'm going, oh, remember those first boards that we had? Like, we've improved this and we've improved that, and we've made it, this, and we've made it now where, who knows, like, I'd love to get it to a point where it's compostable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how insane would that be? Like, how we're looking at kind of getting resins that are 100% plant-based, and we're messing around with different tints for, so shows off the color of the wood a little bit better, and the grain, and like, so we're kind of constantly working and wanting to develop different things, and we're discovering stuff as we go, so this is, again, this like kind of beautiful thing of what we're doing, is we're starting at this grassroots kind of level, and really pushing out. Like, every board that we're making at the moment is handcrafted in Indonesia. And if anyone knows anything about Indonesian craft, like wood craftsmanship, it's some of the best in the world. And we're working with these guys, like, every single piece is touched by these guys, and you can see, like, all of these, you can see the different panels are all unique, and they've all got their little bits. And so it's kind of this, like, it's unique in that way, and almost a custom in that way. But yeah, in terms of like taking an 1/8 of an inch off here and there, we're not at that stage yet, but who knows what the future holds for us.
And do each of these shapers, I mean, you mentioned that Bo Young was super stoked. what about your dad? How's your dad feel about the outcome of the boards?
Yeah, he's loving it now. As I said, he was the hardest guy to to kind of get on board. This all happened through 2019. It was a bit of time, actually. I won't, this is probably time for another podcast, but I was actually running in a federal election in Australia, and also running out, if anyone knows what the Fight for the Bite is, which was the big protest against oil drilling in Australia. I was running all these paddle outs and all of that, and that's how it kind of got started. Was actually we were getting the only real criticism we were getting doing these paddle outs was people going, "Oh, well, you're all hypocrites because you're using oil-based boards to paddle out to fight against oil," which wasn't, to me, again, it's not the fact that, oh, because you're part of the problem, you're not allowed to demand better, or ask better. But anyway, so we were doing that, and I was thinking, I was like, we've got to come up with something better, though, because they're not wrong. The surfing industry has lagged for far too long. We call ourselves environmentalists at heart and all this, but like everything is oil-based in the surfing world. Like, it's not great. But anyway, and then that's when I got in touch with Tom, who's now my partner, and he was like, "Listen, I've got this kind of wooden surfboard project I've just started. Like, what do you think?" And in my head, I was like, "This is just too perfect. It's just like melded in so well that I've been thinking about this. He's got a kind of half a product. Let's work together." And then I actually fractured my skull surfing Uluwatu just after the federal election, and was in a pretty bad state for a few months with a head injury. But it also gave me time to work with my dad, and I kind of brought my dad in, where I was like, "Listen, there's this guy, he's got these wooden surfboards." And my dad originally was a bit like, "Oh, mate, I'm pretty busy. Like, you haven't even got a final product. Like, I don't know." And I was just like, I called him Pops, and I was like, "Pops, just trust me on this one, please. You can just sit in the background and just help me out when I need it, but you don't have to do much. But if you could give me the Red Dingo file, that'd be great." So that was the first one. So he grabbed the Red Dingo file. Sorry, he gave us that one. And the reason we went for that is because it has a huge amount of rocker and a huge amount of single concave. As you know, you were saying, my dad he loves his concave. So we're having to bend the wood two different directions. It's kind of going up and then bending it the other way. So we thought, well, let's go the hardest thing possible, because once we know how to do that, then we know how to we can do any bottom line. So we started doing that, and my dad was still like, I kept roping him into meetings, and he was kind of like, "Yeah, I don't know. Yeah." And we were, and again, this is going through the process of what we've had to deal with. And this is years in the making of the R&D process, but we were putting the ribs in, and I kept cracking my back foot. I'm a pretty heavy footed back foot surfer. I kept cracking it. So we'd put in more ribs, and then it was like more ribs, and then it kept cracking, and then more ribs. And then we're like, "What's going on here?" Like, and then we figured out, we're like, "Oh, well, the fiberglass is flexing, but the wood underneath doesn't have as much flex as the fiberglass. So it keeps popping, and the wood keeps cracking." And then we thought, well, if we do that, why don't we just fiberglass the inside, which is what I was talking about earlier, fiberglass the inside, and now we've created our own composite, so the wood is flexing just as much as the fiberglass because it's held between there. And as soon as we did that, we're like, "Oh, we're onto a winner." So we ripped out half the ribs, but then I kept doing these bottom turns, and I'm a pretty picky surfer as well, because I've always ridden my dad's boards, and they go really good, So I kept doing these bottom turns, but they kept drawing out too much, and I wasn't able to hit the lip. And so I sat down with my dad, and I was like, "What's going on here? What are we doing wrong?" Like, and he was the one who kind of looked at it, and he goes, your ribs are going from rail to rail, which is fine until it gets to the back third of the board around the fins." And he goes, "Because you've got no torsion. Your ribs are locking in
too stiff in the
too
tail.
stiff. Yeah, it's locking in the rails, so you don't have any twist at all, and that's kind of the back third of your board is like, that's the control panel, that's your gears, your accelerator, your brake, it's everything, So we're like, okay, so we ripped out all of the ribs on the inside. Then we're like, well, what if we go, and I'll show you, what if we go a Y shape, and excuse for a second.
Yeah.
so what if we go the Y shape like this?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so rather than it being locking in the fins going straight across, we've gone for this Y rib.
I
And,
see.
and what we do is when it comes to that as well, we've put flex glue that's so that the wood actually isn't touching. So there's constant flex in every single aspect of our board. And that, so then we made those, we've sent them back to Australia from Indonesia. We've got these boards. I was surfing out of Bells this one day. It was kind of 3 to 6 foot, kind of head to double overhead. And I had this wave where I was like feeling it out. I'm like, oh, that feels like one of my dad's boards. Yes. And I kind of did a couple of turns. And then I came off the bottom in that kind of in the bowl shory.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
we're
I just
close
kind
to
of
that.
looked at it and I was like, oh, just throw it up there and see what happens. I kind of went as hard as I could, bottom turn, and this thing turned on a dime. And I've just cracked the lip, came down, and it was one of those ones of like, am I that good a surfer? Like, what happened then? Like, like that was crazy. And I had the best surf, came in, and I've gotten changed, jumped in the car, looked at my phone, and my dad sent me a message, and he's like, I saw that wave. I'm all in. He was like,
Ah,
you guys have done it. That's what we needed. The performance was just there. And I was like, and then that was since then, like my dad's been on board with the whole thing. And he's been a huge help. And he actually, as we all know, he's a very big character. He has a very big presence, but he's actually been really respectful of making sure that it wasn't the Maurice Cole show or it wasn't a Maurice Cole company. He kind of
yeah,
sat in the background, helped us out when we needed it. He was pivotal in getting our designs to where they are today, our internal structure. But he was also, very mindful of knowing that this was kind of me breaking out and kind of not being in his shadow.
yeah,
So for that, I'll always be very grateful for. But then we also, when we've had issues, I have always gone back to my dad and I sit him down. I'm like, what do you reckon about this? What are we doing wrong? Where can we improve? Like, so it's been really helpful having him as, he's got about 6,000 years of experience in the surfing industry. So,
yeah.
it's great to have him there in our corner.
Cool. Well, that's good to know. And it feels like that's a perfect place to end our discussion, Damo.
Yeah.
I'm excited for what you're doing. I see it as a bridge, from the polyurethane to things 30 years from now when I'm no longer on this planet. Like there needs to be a bridge. It's very similar to the fact that we're in an energy crisis now. We can't just flip to solar and wind, or none of us would be able to eat.
Yeah.
Like we need a bridge of energy that gets us to a place in 40 years where, okay, we've done it. It's just not you can't just flip the switch here. And so I'm excited about what you're doing. And like I said, I've ridden the board and I'm super stoked on the one, and good for you, and good for what you're doing. I'm stoked. And for Tom too, your partner, that's cool. And
He's
but
been a huge part of that. And you're absolutely right that like it's a transition. And that's kind of, again, going back to the energy crisis and all of that stuff, is people get so lost. There's so much noise on both sides where no one's listening to each other. And like, it's this weird thing of like, well, we can't just shut everything down. And it's like the other side's like, well, we're not saying we need to shut everything down. We need to transition. And it's kind of this, everyone's getting lost in the noise, but then translating it with surfing. That's the same thing as what we're saying. We're not, as I said earlier, we're not saying to go out and throw all your surfboards away and that you guys are all horrible people for having PU boards, but we're saying like, hey, try it out. You haven't got much to lose, really. You're going to go out there and have a hell of a lot of fun on these new boards, and it's going to be a sensation that you've never had before. But I'm very confident in saying these boards go really, really well. So you're not compromising on your performance, but you are helping the environment so that our kids, I don't even have children yet, but like, I always say, like, I'm doing all of this. I work for Surfrider Foundation in Australia as well. I used to. Like all the things that we're doing today is like, it's not for you and me today. This is for my future children so that I can actually push them into waves at Bells when when they're old enough, and we can go surfing together. And like, that's what I'm imagining is like, it's not for us today. This is for future generations so that they can enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. And Damien, thanks again for being on the BoardRoom Podcast. I'm stoked to meet you and to get you on here, and we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure, Scott, and hopefully we can go for a surf again soon.
Okay, buddy. Good to see you.
Thanks, mate.